This is Mikey Mason, and you're listening to Why We Game.
I'm Brodor, and this is Why We Game. My guest today is print designer Ruben Smith-Zempel. Ruben, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm all right. How is it living in the secessionist Pacific Northwest?
Not too bad. A little crazy at times, but not too bad.
Yeah, have things calmed down given the new administration?
A little bit. There's still protests, but Oregon is a super weird state anyway, in that like Portland, Eugene, and the big cities are pretty liberal. But the whole rest of the state is just super red and conservative, and so, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting place.
Weird.
My wife and I visited there over the summer, and it's quite beautiful. But it's politically, it's very turbulent landscape. If I can mix sort of ground and air.
Yeah, no, it's odd, but you live here long enough, it just becomes part of the background, I guess.
Right. So, Ruben, you are a print designer, and for someone who is uneducated like myself, can you please explain to the listener what print design is in terms of games or game production?
So, take like a Dungeons & Dragons book. When it is sent to the print designer, it is a Word document. And it doesn't have any of the fancy typefaces. There's none of the images in there. There's none of that. The tables are pretty plain. It's the print designer's job to take that text and turn it into actually a finished product. So we're the ones who will often come up with the backgrounds, the fancy paper backgrounds or whatever you see in books, and then format all the tables, turn all the text. And then it's also the product of, like, you make sure, like, when you lay out a book, they're usually 8.5 by 11. Sometimes you'll have like a paragraph that's just like 2 little lines, like an orphan paragraph. You might want to shift those up or shift them back. And there's a lot of little tiny tricks you can use to kind of massage the text so it reads better. You're not left with weird orphan lines and stuff like that. You got to throw in the images. Oftentimes we'll be in charge of setting up the indexing. So yeah, we make Word documents look pretty.
I have so many self-indulgent things that I want to ask you, and I can't resist the temptation for at least this one. Why does not every single role-playing game have a solid table of contents and a solid index?
It comes down to a few things, which have changed recently with print on demand, but generally books are printed in signatures. Have you ever wondered why so many role-playing books are 256 pages?
I've never noticed that, but I was going to ask you to break down the verbiage of printed in signature. So please, go ahead.
So signatures are a block of pages that have to be printed together in order to bind into a book. Most signatures are 16 pages.
I grok.
So 256.
So when I look at my role-playing book and it has these crenellations is not the right word, but basically dips and changes in how the creasing is along the spine where the pages meet. I gotcha.
Yeah, that's the signature. Because usually they're done in blocks of 8 double-sided pages, which makes 16. And so for the longest time,
so
it was a real effort.
They would skimp on my goddamn rule book. It's a book of rules. It's a goddamn technical manual, and they would skimp on those things because of a fucking page count.
Yeah, well, sometimes I've had to cut indexes. Sometimes I've gotten to put in better indexes because there were pages left in the signature, and then some companies just didn't care enough.
Okay, well, so I'm gonna tell you this. When nudge, because that makes me sound ambitious. If I ever did a role-playing game, I would come to you and be like, look, here's the blank document, the table of contents, and the index and the maps are the most important things to me in the fucking world, right? Everything else is cool and gravy, but my game's gotta be playable.
Yeah, and I've always strove think it's strove. Verb tenses. Those are weird.
Because strived doesn't sound right. Striven doesn't. Yeah.
Those are words I would find in my crosswords.
Yeah. Though you have struggled too.
Yeah. To make sure that there's at least a good table of contents. And these days, with some of the automated tools, it's gotten a lot easier to do that because it's really easy to all right, I want a table of contents and I want to use header 1 through header 3. And you can do a lot of automatic styling. So it's a lot easier to make a really good table of contents. A lot of times it just comes down to the editor and the company saying, we don't want to waste the pages.
That's brutal. That level of because I can't even say it's interfering with the art. It's impacting the effectiveness which someone like me who is dyslexic, how I effectively play the game. I find an index so gosh darn useful.
Yeah, I like indexes too. And these days they even have really good indexing tools where you can, so long as you tag the words, it can be pretty easy to kick out an index toward the end. That's one reason I've always liked working with Hero Games. They're always really good about putting in a good index. I loved working with Steve. And I've completely blanked on his last name. But he knew enough in design that once I'd done all the major stuff, I could actually kick it over to him, and he would often do the index for me, which was just the best thing ever.
Let me put a pin in Hero Games, because I have a lot of questions about Hero Games, but I have another self-indulgent question that I want to ask you. Are you like a professional chef when you game master, and do your players have these tremendous 7-course adventures with beautiful maps and player handouts? Or are you like the bitter chef that the last thing in the world you want to do when you get home is cook, and if they want a game, they're eating canned fucking soup?
I'm more like I'm the kind of chef who loves what he does, but when he gets home, he's only got 15 minutes to put together dinner, and I'm going to bodge together something tasty, but it's not going to be super fancy. Okay. Although with the move to doing stuff digitally, I've been doing a lot more maps, and I've done cartography professionally off and on as well, so.
My God, you're like the perfect game master.
The one thing I do really well is whenever I start a new game, I'll make, those old little, not 3-wing binders, but the ones that have little tabs that you can put paper into and then slot them down. I'll make a new handout for each new campaign that's got all the house rules and everything else all nicely formatted. I keep an updated house rule document. You mean like this? Yeah, like those.
Yeah, I do. So I've gone to using Google Docs, right? So then
I've switched to use a lot of that too. All my house rules now are on Google Docs.
Right. It's amazing, right? Because you can give your players comment access. And then if they want to go in and they want to say, hey, Mike, change this, or actually you're incorrect about that, or they can be like, hey, Mike, don't forget this son of a bitch owes me da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? So we can go in and manage the game together, and it takes a lot of the work off of me as a game master.
Yeah, I also use OneNote a lot.
Amen.
I keep a campaign OneNote, and I take the extra time and I make them look all fancy. I'll put in the actual backgrounds and the graphics, and in a lot of ways, it's really kind of a pain in the ass, because even when I go, all the Fear the Cons I've gone to, I've run games, I write everything out like a full published actual adventure, and then end up not even referencing the document half the time.
Is it because of the love of the thing, or is that part of your writing process?
A little bit of both, but mostly just the love, and I can't stand a poorly formatted document. Just properly formatting something makes it so much easier to access and understand. For me personally, when I'm doing like campaign notes, even the act of formatting it cements it in my mind better.
I understand, because something for me that helps me to better understand a game that I'm running is immersing myself in it. So the idea of putting it into something that you think is aesthetically palatable makes a lot of sense to help consume the material.
Yeah, the one thing I do use my professional skills a lot for is doing handouts. And I'm the kind of DM who, like, I'll print design a document, then print it out on actual parchment paper I have, and then I'll even weather it a little bit. Or there was a couple of games where I was running Dark Sun, and I was kind of ripping off Shadow of the Colossus a little bit, and that they had to fight these big, giant, like, mechanical beast things with monsters on them. But I actually took foam core, gridded it out, built the actual monsters as the physical battle map, and then just put little push pins with the characters' images on it so they could climb around the monster in battle space.
Oh, we are simpatico. That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. So how did you start? So you said you're 41 years old. How did you get into the gaming hobby?
Oh, way back in high school. I grew up in a tiny town.
Are you from the Midwest?
No, Oregon.
Okay.
There's some tiny towns in Oregon. No, Elkton, Oregon. Population 172.
Wow.
Yeah. There wasn't a lot to do. We played basketball, and we played Magic, and we played D&D. We had to drive, I had to drive 30 minutes, 30 miles for, bowling. The nearest movie theater was 40 miles away. Okay.
So in a town that small, where the hell did you have access to gaming material?
There was a great gaming shop in Roseburg, which was maybe 35, 40 minutes away, called Neverland Comics. And they carried a full line. It was a comic shop, but this was back in the 90s when comic shops also carried he carried all the role-playing game stuff. That's where we go for Magic pre-releases, stuff like that.
How did they do business-wise being a game store, being in such a niche market, in such an area with a really limited population?
Roseburg was bigger. That was a few thousand at least, maybe 10,000 people, but they're still around.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, there was quite a few number of geeks in my high school,
So out of that number of people then, out of the 172 people, how many of those people were in your gaming group?
We had a group of 5 or 6, mostly just my friends.
That's an unprecedented percentage, but then how many, was gaming, obviously it was popular among some people, but you said there was a good group of people in your high school that were gaming?
Yeah. When you count Magic players, we probably had a dozen people at one point, and the high school had 60 kids.
60
total? Yeah, that small. Yeah.
Wow.
My graduating class was 12 kids.
How do you go from rural Oregon to a large city like Portland?
Well, I went to college in Wisconsin, which is where I went with my wife, and then there's a really great art school here. So when I transferred out of the liberal arts school I was going to, I went to PNCA, which is in Portland. My cousin she graduated from Reed College. My sister went to Evergreen, and I've always liked Portland. It was a place we visited a few times, and I always loved the city. I always knew we wanted to move here, and when I got accepted into art school, that was just the catalyst to move here.
The natural progression. So were you doing D&D first, or were you playing Magic first back when you were a kid?
Actually, the first game I ever played is for Christmas one year. I got the Shadowrun first edition book.
Get out of Dodge. That was the first one. So is that where you developed a sort of masochistic passion for buckets of D6? That abuse, that is a very, very awkward introduction to the hobby as a gamer.
Well, I misspoke a little bit. There was a guy, one of my old friends, Joe. He was a few years older. He ran D&D a little bit for me. So I wasn't completely brand new, but the first game I ever run, even before playing it, was Shadowrun.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. And that gets me into Hero System to some degree, but I don't want to dig too much into that, but it reminds me of an abusive relationship, right? The Shadowrun first edition just beat you with a sock full of small D6s, and then years later you're doing print design for a company that is also beating you with sockfuls of D6.
The funny thing too is I was young. I was 11 or 12, and I just started running without ever having played it. And I read through the book, but I didn't know all the rules, man. We just used the rules we liked. I didn't realize that deckers couldn't just drag everybody else into the matrix with them. So I just let the decker take the rest of the team with them into the matrix. And then I gave the decker his meat space initiative passes and his decker passes together.
Aha.
So the decker became just the matrix god while everybody else got to run around and support him, but they weren't nearly as cool.
Sure.
Like, I just let him use his programs to, like, just edit the matrix. It's like, I want to make guns. Okay, roll some dice. You can make some guns. Basically, I let the deckers be Neo. So
it sounds like you had fun, though.
Oh, yeah, we loved it. And then we played a lot of D&D, too, because that's what a lot of the other guys liked. And second edition had so many supplements. And then Magic was just the game we played at breaks and just all the time.
Do you still play Magic?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
I love Magic. Oh, yeah.
Now, again, and I guess, well, it's my show, it's my brand, I guess I should own it. You seem like such a nice guy.
Oh, well, well, yeah, there are some asshole, like,
and I cannot admonish all Magic players, particularly when I was working for both the Fantasy Shop and for Miniature Market. Some of my absolute favorite customers were Magic players. However, and I know this is just my 15 odd years of daily anecdotal experience, so it doesn't account for much, but out of all of the subcultures, except for maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon players, they're the messiest, cursingest, thievingest, disrespectingest group of gamers.
I mean, I'm an L1 judge, so I've judged Magic tournaments, and oh god, you're so right. No, I play kitchen table Magic with my buddies.
Well, now
like
that's a different. So you're a gamer, but I mean, when I think Magic player, and this is my own hang up, I think people that are at least bare minimum doing FNM regularly at their FLGS.
No, not so much. No, we play Commander, and we play like Vintage, and it's just a bunch of old guys sitting around the table playing cards. As she used to get together and drink and just throw some shade at each other.
Okay, well, let me ask then. So when you're gaming, you start out with D&D second edition, kind of dip your toe in the water. Then you get into Shadowrun and you really get into it. You're doing Magic. These are games that all have a pretty strong tradition of rules, knowing the rules, and min-maxing said rules. When you're gaming, is crunch or mechanics the thing that you gravitate toward?
No, not particularly.
So are you just good at them?
Yeah, I'm the weird guy that I can read the rule book, and I could probably run all of 5e from memory.
Do you have an eidetic memory?
I don't think I have an eidetic memory, but I've got a very good memory.
Because I'm not saying that I would harm you and eat your brain, but if you do have an eidetic memory, you probably shouldn't tell me.
Yeah, I've got internalized Savage Worlds, D&D 5e, Fates, a few other systems.
I'm quite envious of that because even before I was, an alcoholic, drug-addled, middle-aged person, I still didn't have a great mind for recalling rules. But some games I very much enjoy the crunch of. I really like the crunch of 30.5 edition D&D. I love the moderate crunch of Savage Worlds. So I like games like that, but
I do find making characters a very satisfying thing. Like, I do like it when all the mechanics line up and stuff like that. And part of the reasons I like learning the rules so much is so I know how to break them and I know how to house rule stuff. I mean, for a while in the 3.5 era, I was doing a ton of house rule stuff, and I was one of the few creators back at the time that people would just generally let allow in. I had a reputation for being very mechanically balanced.
Right, because that's a hero system in general, and forgive me for sounding, overly critical, but I never got into hero system because I never wanted to get a degree in a subject in school that I enjoyed or that I excelled at. So I certainly wasn't going to get a degree in mathematics. So I just didn't play hero.
I I don't honestly play much Hero. A lot of the books I've worked on, I've never even played the system.
So you're a whore.
A little. Sort of.
I mean, no, it's great. I am pro sell out, right? You find your market, right? And you get into it. Besides, the important thing is that you are working in an industry that you have passion for, which supports your hobby in that industry that you have passion for, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know the hero system. I can run it. The funny thing with hero system, it's almost entirely all front loaded. But if I'm going to run supers, I'm going to use mutants and masterminds because it does 90% of what hero does with 10% of the effort.
That's a great elevator pitch for mutants and masterminds. I know Green Ronin is still around. Is there a viable edition of mutants and masterminds, or are they still
3E's out there? There's a lot of good books. They're somewhere over on my shelf.
I always thought that was a really intriguing system, and sheer elegance in its simplicity, if I can steal a line from the middleman. But as a game master, I had a hard time wrapping my head around the range of, so if the damage is X, X plus A, then we're in this damage range. If it's X plus B, and I always dicked that math up.
Yeah, and a lot of times you can keep a small cheat matrix, which is one of the reasons, like, the later hero books and, like, the hero system books, like, Champions Complete and like Fantasy Complete, we put a bunch of tables in the back of the book that you'd have to reference a lot, so you don't have to go scanning through the book, and all the reference tables are where you need them.
And when you say hero system is front loaded, am I correct in interpreting that what you're suggesting, all the work is done in character creation and the after the fact work is pretty simple? Okay. Yeah.
Character creation is what takes you a long time. There's a lot of fiddly little bits and modifiers and stuff you can add, but once you start playing, not that hard.
Well, and it's a game system too. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but my experience always was you can have 5 people sit down at the table, 4 of which are making characters, and 1 of which is the game master that's helping us all make our characters. And then there is a player at the table that not only knows the rules really, really well, but way better than the game master, and the same 300 points that we're all going to get to build our character, so-and-so over there is going to do something way broken relative to the other of us. And that was frustrating.
Yeah, well, and that just comes down to the DM's got to, like, say, hey, look, I'm going to give you 2 options. 1, build like everybody else, or B, you're now the dedicated player helper, and you're in charge of making sure everybody else is as powerful as you.
That's a good way to do it, because now, the player helper, in my experience as a game master, usually doesn't work out very well, right? But making them responsible and saying, well, okay, dickface, if you're gonna be like that, then everybody else, you're gonna make them do it too. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's never been a big problem for me, because in our group, I am the rules guy, and I'm running half the time. And my big problem is making sure I don't try and suggest too many things and kind of start trying to, like, learning to shut up when somebody's like, oh, that feat's not great, but you know what,
sure.
You like it.
Yeah, it's sort of, people want to take a thing that is not necessarily optimal for them to take, and you want to coax them into taking the optimal thing?
Sometimes, yeah. Or just to something like, I will speak up when, like, I know what they want to do. It's like, okay, I want my guy to be good at this, and, like, this feat looks like, and like, no, it's not. This other one that you're not looking at is going to do. Yeah, these days it's like, well, maybe try looking at this other thing too. And here's why I think it might be good, but it's your character. And DM, I just channel all that rule stuff into just making things for the DM side. I really, really love making magic items.
Oh, for hero systems specifically, or in any system?
Any system. And, like, I also love, like, especially for D&D, making monsters, creating new custom monsters with, like, special abilities and stuff. I think will be a challenge.
Okay, all right. Let's take a step back. You've turned down the candles. You've got the romantic music on. Like, you've got me. I'm in, man. When 3.0 D&D came out, I was just in love. They had gotten rid of THAC0. All the math made sense. I can add class levels to monsters. What the hell is a template? Oh, my Jesus, tap dancing Christ. All the rules that you've given me to get under the hood and get my elbows greasy and dirty and just make this unrecognizable atrocity. I adore it.
Yeah, that is actually one of the reasons I adored 4th edition. Because on the D&amp side, it was the best tool set I ever had for creating challenges. Everything was so codified and structured.
I will agree with you absolutely in terms of balance that being a game master in 4th edition was easier because doing the encounter level challenge rating dance was better, right? Totally agree with that. But in terms of adaptability and adding feats and class levels and buffs and magic items and stuff like that, I just don't think 4th edition compares.
Oh, see, I ran toward the latter half of 4th edition's lifespan. I ran entire campaigns on one sheet of paper. I had a table printed out with all the attack damage values and a small little table of status effects, and then I just made up what I needed on the fly.
See, part of me feels like that I got swindled buying all those books. Part of me is extremely envious of the intellect that it took to boil it down, right? I mean, that is absolutely amazing. But then I have a lot of cognitive dissonance about what does that say about your game if it can all be boiled down to one sheet?
Oh, just because that's the numbers I needed. The flavor, which is what I love, and the descriptions, you're not going to get that in any book. All you need is the numbers to plug into the flavor. And you figure out the flavor first and like, okay, well, this is a big monster guy with a huge mace who's going to make a sweeping attack, so I'm going to use the moderate damage value at a slightly lower attack bonus, but it's going to knock everybody prone, and if they fail a save, maybe they're also stunned.
Well, no, I get it. I feel like you've boiled it down with such brilliance that I don't know if I love you or hate you for it.
And that's what most games are. Once you know what the the underlying formulas and what the target numbers of most things are, you don't really need to memorize all the rules. You just need the basic numbers, because once you understand the structure of the game and how the numbers should interact, adding flavor and breaking those rules is easy.
I understand what you're saying. It feels anathema to me. I need all my stuff and my toy soldiers and my books and my Game Master screens and I need all my accoutrement, right?
Yeah, for me, the first 5th edition GM screen was the best thing ever because the tables it had were stuff like something happens, a random name generator. Those are the things I need. I am terrible at coming up with names on the fly. That's why every merchant in my game is usually named Honest Bob, to the point where now he's just got an emporium. Because I kept, wait, was it the last merchant Bob? Oh yeah, this is Honest Bob. Okay. And then now they're like, let's go to Honest Bob's. And I had to create a backstory for this one merchant who found this magic item who could create clones. And another magic item that basically let you transfer stuff between cabinets. Well, okay. So now he just cloned himself so many times. So now there's an Honest Bob's in every big settlement.
It's a franchise. It's a corporation. I mean, whatever kind of spread you want it to have. But what is your design process like then, or your writing process for a game like? Because most of your gaming hobby these days, and for most of your career as a gamer, has been role playing stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Magic, of course, but role playing focused.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What does your design process look like? So when you sit down with pencil and paper or keyboard or whatever to work on an adventure, you obviously have a very good head for the rules. You have a very good head for how the math works together. So when you're writing an adventure, what does that look like? I mean, because I'm assuming that all your effort is spent on writing fluff.
Yeah, a lot of it. The process usually actually starts in the shower or on my daily walk.
Okay.
As I just start kind of outlining things in my head and kind of organize them how I want them to be. And, okay, this would be cool. And I like to think usually in big set pieces or big action moments. So I kind of come up with like, okay, well, this time I want him to fight a shipwreck golem in an underwater city that is slowly filling up and other were sharks are getting in. Okay, well, how do I get him to this set piece? And so I'll work backwards a little bit. And then once I work backwards a little, it'd be cool if this was there instead. And so I kind of go through and edit. And then once I do that, I throw up an outline. I'll just do like a bullet pointed outline with a few different headers and kind of throw a couple things in. And I'll just do like a keyword table for rooms. I don't bother usually for home games writing stuff out fully. Like I won't write like the text I'm going to speak. I'll just put notes of like candelabras, tomb, dusty, skeleton noises or whatever. And I just do the rest on the fly.
Right, which is quite similar to the process that I will do, but instead of the big set pieces, I have a tendency to go toward the vignettes. But I'm totally with you that the outlining is the way to go. So what do you do then for inspiration? Or is there art or books or, I mean, being somebody with a print design background, I don't know. Are you looking at the same kind of things that I'm looking at to find that inspiration?
Sometimes when I'm low on inspiration, I'll just pull down a box of magic cards and start going through the pictures.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
There's a lot of really great art. Sometimes even card names can give you ideas. Otherwise, it's just, I mean, whatever I'm looking at. Like, I'm still running an adventure path, not an adventure path, but I'm like, I recently rewatched Return of the Jedi, and I'm like, that whole take it down the shield generator thing is a pretty cool idea. I think I'm going to do a riff on that. Yeah, just
I'm a big fan of blatant
random
theft.
stuff. Oh, yeah. You just this was an arcane lighthouse that was holding an illusion spell over where they needed to attack, so it wasn't exactly a shield generator, but it was totally the shield generator, and they're now totally attacking the Death Star.
Right, the beats were all there.
Yeah. Yeah, some of my players even like point out, this is like the shield generator, Return to the Jedi. And I'm like, oh yeah, it totally is. That's exactly what I was feeling.
It's always nice too when somebody at the table gets the nod, right? And then you can just be totally honest about it. So what was your first print design gig in the hobby industry?
Strangely, it was a fan thing. So in 3.5 when Eberron came out.
Oh, sure.
I loved it. I love the setting. I still love it. And I'm like, it'd be really cool because in Eberron, there's the Kornberg Chronicle, right? There's the in-game newspaper. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make that. I've got the skills. So I started a fan site called Kornberg Chronicle. And then I got other people to start helping me. And we started putting out issues once a month that were all like campaign hooks. And they were done up like an actual thing. And I had artists working with me and I had writers for a while. Keith Baker himself actually did some stuff for us.
That's fantastic, man.
Yeah, and it was under a pen name, but yeah.
And then do you get noticed?
Yeah, a couple of small companies kind of noticed I was putting this out. They're like, hey, we need help putting together a book. I'm like, well, that kind of sounds like something I could do. I'm like, and you put on the bus, like, oh, sure, I could totally do that. And like, I'd taken some design classes and I knew what I was doing, but at the same time, like, oh God, I've never put together a book. And so it's a lot of like frantic research and talking with some professors because I got the first gig when I was still in art school. And then, from there, I just got a few more names from word of mouth. And then, I got picked up Henry Lopez over at, Paradigm Concepts. They're the guys who did Arcanus, which was a huge 3.5 setting. Still going too. And they did Witch Hunter and stuff like that. And he's like, hey, you want to do something? I started working with them, and I did almost everything Paradigm put out for like years. So
then you were doing your regular day gig and doing print design part-time?
Yeah, for a little bit, but then I jumped to full-time pretty quick. Like, I just decided to go freelance.
Is the majority of your work role-playing game stuff, or where else?
Almost all of it.
Really? You have fallen into a gig where you're working in an industry that you love and something that you're gifted at, and it's the vast majority of your work.
Yeah.
So do you ever run into I do it so much, I don't want to do it anymore, I don't want to do it in my free time?
No, not really, because doing the print design isn't really anything like running a game or like playing in the game.
But
it's so much more art-based.
But you're so immersed in gaming, right? Like I couldn't help myself from getting lost in the world that I'm designing, right?
That's the thing. Like when I'm laying a book out, I almost never read the text. It's just another visual element. And it's all about making sure it looks good visually. And yeah, there's some stuff I'm working on like, oh, this is really interesting. I'll actually sit down and read the whole thing. And I've done some editing and stuff like that too, but no, I've never gotten tired of it.
What makes for an interesting page design in a role-playing game?
That is a good question. I really thought, especially in the 3.5 era, they got too busy. I like things that are a little more clean, and it's all about, and then you're going to have fancy designs and some stuff, and like, it's about having a really nice kind of, if you have border art, nice border art, but very subtle sort of border art, and then the headers are a big kind of visual component, and putting a lot of care into like the typeface choice for the, because headers can, in the font, can tell you a lot about the game, even without saying anything, and depending on what typeface you use, it could say like, okay, this is a fantasy book because this is kind of a fantasy font, but if it's like dark fantasy, then you want something that's maybe a little rougher or something a little more old school gothic, but if it's like a Shadowrun book, then you want a very sans serif futuristic looking font, and then having great artwork always helps. And then I both love and hate books with lots of tables. I hate them because tables are a pain in the ass to do, and they take by far one of the longest things, but they also break things up. Just having a lot of, and sidebars are nice too, because they will visually break up the page.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
See, those are things that as a fan, I don't ever consider, right? Those are just, the book is pretty or the book isn't pretty. And I know exactly what you mean about 3.5. I'm actually getting ready to start a midnight game for my regular gaming group. And going back and looking through the 3.5 rules, his books are hideous. Whereas I prefer 3.5 to 5th edition, although I'm not crapping on 5th edition. I think it's really good. But the game design of 5th edition, or the graphic design or print design, is so good. It's such a better looking book. Conversely, I never tried, and it's going to sound so biased, but I never tried Pathfinder 2nd edition because I just can't look at the book.
Yeah, and it's something people think is a really easy job, but it absolutely isn't. And a lot of it is kind of less is more.
No. You're absolutely right. And that was something that I was talking to a different guy that I interviewed recently about the essential in graphic design for your game. Your game has to be able to sell itself off the shelf, right? If you're relying on a traditional brick and mortar market or a digital market, your game has to be able to sell itself. And to me, I just picked up Pathfinder 2nd edition, and I was like, I am not going to fight my way through this word salad.
Yeah, well, and there's some games I've picked up, and I'm like, oh, this looks terrible. I'm not going to buy it.
Yeah, which is, I mean, you have to consider, as much as I hate the fact that the business aspect gets in the way of the art of the hobby, it's essential, right? There are two necessary sides of the same coin.
At the same time, like Blades in the Dark, half the reason I bought that is I just thought the design of it was just so brilliant.
Have you played it?
Because oh yeah, I love it.
I have not played it, but I have played Band of Blades, and I am a big, big fan of the Forged in the Dark stuff.
Yeah, I love the Forged in the Dark stuff too, and I've worked on a couple of books for it. But yeah, no, because it's all black and white, and it's very stark, and it very fits the theme, and it's very clean with just enough rough edges to give you the idea of kind of danger.
Yeah, no, it's true. And the thing that is opposite of most games, because I assume in your experience over the last 17 odd years of doing, this gig of doing print design, you've seen not just the amount of rules change, but also the page count and the size of books change, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I assume that
and then
everything's getting smaller. with a few rare exceptions, right? So you have your Pathfinders, you have your Blades in the Dark or whatever, which are big, heavy books, but a lot of stuff seems to be just getting thinner.
Some, and then some not. I mean, I've worked with a lot of the big publishers, and no hero book is ever going to clock in, at least main book, under like 200 pages. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of smaller stuff. But the other big change that happened was print on demand. Like One Bookshelf, which is what One Bookshelf is, the company that runs Drive-Thru RPG and Drive-Thru Cards and all that stuff. They stopped doing 16-page signatures, and now the signatures are 2 pages. So now you can do kind of smaller stuff, and there's not like the minimum page now is 40. With so many people doing reading on tablets and computers and stuff too, that's changed as well, and making sure there's good accessibility options, which changes how you do some stuff as well. So it's definitely, as the technology has evolved, game books have kind of evolved along with it.
I would argue that the gaming hobby, our culture, or if you'll excuse the douchiness, the zeitgeist has changed, right? It seems like the kind of games that people are interested in playing are games that are less rules intensive. I mean, Hero System, for example, and I don't want to put you in a bad position and what have you, but Hero System, I mean, I can mark the time in my career as a retailer where Hero System alienated retailers in terms of their business wanting to go exclusively, don't buy from retailers, buy from the hobby shop. But even then, right about that same time though, the game zeitgeist starts to change and people start to play games that are just, the whole indie press revolution happens and people are playing games that are skinnier with less rules, right? So those two things happen to coincide.
No, well, even this, so Champions Complete.
Yeah,
it's not a huge book.
That is thin for a Hero System.
It's 240 pages with an index in a 4-page index. And this is all you need to run Champions these days.
That's crazy because I remember, the jokes about if YouTube had existed at the time, people would take their hero books and, try to put a bullet through them or whatever, right? I even think that may have happened with the 5th edition hardcover. When you have a book that is so mighty that it can actually, stop a 22 round, that's weird.
Yeah. Well, and even with 5e, you notice that the rules have been streamlined a bit. And I think it's just people want to spend less time mastering rules and just more time playing. And I think as we started getting more and more new role players, we're getting more and more people with different tastes. And so now you're starting to see a lot more of these indie games that really strive to just do one thing really, really well. I mean, one of the beautiful things about Heroes, you could use it to run anything. But these days, if I want a game about romancing Victorian pirates in the waving aether, I could probably find that. And if I haven't found it, it's now going to exist in a couple of weeks because somebody realizes there's someone who wants to buy that.
There's some indie website out there that has that role-playing game, possibly even for free.
And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that may have been a little bit about one of the Fate books I laid out. I just remember that one because instead of doing illustrations, they had photographs for everything. They got models and dressed them up. And
I'd lose sleep about plagiarism, right? Not that you're publishing anything on your own, I presume, but I would just lose sleep. I'm running a game. I would be so worried about my influences from the work that I have seen in my daily grind.
Oh, no. And most of the stuff I've done on my own are just little D&D products. Like here's a collection of a dozen fun magic items, or here's an adventure, stuff like that.
And you
do see some.
I'm sorry, you were saying you'll see.
And you'll see some stuff that's kind of similar, but another thing too is a lot of times so many of these systems are open source these days. Like Fate, anybody can use the Fate rules. It's open source, or it's Creative Commons. Same with Forge in the Dark. I mean, a lot more. 5e even opened up a lot of third-party stuff. So, and gaming's had a long history. You're eventually going to find two products that are fairly close together, just by sheer happenstance.
No, I just meant in my gaming career, I take such pride of not running modules and doing my own thing, and I would be so afraid that I've subconsciously absorbed other people's ideas and tried to sell them as my own as some scummy piece of garbage.
Oh, home games. It's probably happened.
Yeah, are you kidding? There's the amount of theft that I've deliberately done in my home games is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the current D&D game I'm running, well, it started as Ghost of Saltmarsh. I'm like, oh, I'm going to run this. I'm not running that. I used Saltmarsh as a setting. I ran the first adventure, and then now it's completely different. And, like, I've used some of the maps. It's about it.
Really? Yeah. No, so the game I'm working on currently, I think I'm going to use more of the original source material as written than I ever have before. That's not to say that I'm not going to change stuff, but...
Well, and I started doing that because I'm like, I could really use kind of a light load as a GM, and like, I'll just run this module. It looks pretty fun. I loved the old Saltmarsh adventures way back in the day, so I'm like, I'll just run that, and then things shut down, and suddenly I'm like, oh, I have a lot more free time now, so I might as well. That, and I just can't stop myself anyway. Like you, I kind of have an aversion to running written modules.
Even though you've got increased amounts of free time, your game group is still meeting, I must presume, digitally?
Yep, digitally.
And that's going well?
Yeah, it's actually been going well. And we've gone through a gamut of tools.
Really?
Trying
Okay.
to get this. I have done play-by-post for a long time now.
But now play-by-post is not we're doing Fantasy Grounds or Roll20 or whatever. That's somebody runs a forum or if you're old, a MUD, and then you've got moderators and whatever. So,
well, what it did do is it gave me a jump on knowing how to share maps and stuff like that digitally. And I was the one because I was used to doing stuff online, and I'd done like online games before. None of the rest of that group had, and they're like, what do we do? Fortunately, one of our players, his company has a big company account to Zoom, so he's able to host the good Zoom calls every week for us. And then, so I started using Google Draw. You drop the map in Google Draw, then you give the link to your players, giving everybody edit permission, and so now they can move their tokens around. It was very low-key, and then I found a website called Roll Dice with Friends. They did digital dice rolls, and that's what we use. Google Draw and that, and Zoom.
But even this, right, just the talking over you, the flow of conversation is so herky-jerky, even with, strong internet. Now trying to do it with several other people, I'd get so frustrated.
Yeah, we've been gaming together a long time, so we have a pretty good flow, and I think that's kind of helped us a little bit too. And yeah, we have people talking over each other, but I guess I just don't sweat it.
It would drive me crazy. Connection issues would drive me crazy. Are you running this game?
There's three of us who DM, and so we rotate through games.
Okay, so do you guys do like season cycles? Like, hey, I'm going to run for X number of months, or you just kind of wing it?
We kind of wing it. Usually it equals out. We'll usually run for about a month, or like the length of a dungeon, and then we'll swap out, and then we're like, just at one point we can say, hey, I'm going to need a break soon. Who wants to jump in next?
How mechanically drastically do you guys change from one cycle to the next?
Not very. We're all running 5e, so.
Okay, so everyone who's playing the game, they can have their head in 5e, and it's not like I'm playing the new Deadlands for 3 months, and then I'm playing 5e, and then I'm playing, insert weird, I'm playing Apocalypse World or whatever.
Yeah, we try to stick to, every once in a while I'll switch up to Savage Worlds or whatever system I can get them to play. But it's mostly a D&D group, and that's fine. I like having my weekly D&D. I had another tabletop group, but we just decided to take a break through the whole thing. With that group, we switch systems all the time. We tried to make it a point to run different games just to create more separation.
What's your Serpentor? What's your perfect thing look like, right? Like, what's the Ruben is gonna, he's gonna make like Kelly LeBrock from what's the, that are wearing bras on their head. It's weird science, right? So,
man.
So what's your Kelly LeBrock weird science game look like? I mean, what are elements that you want in a game, or is there a game that's on the market right now? Or actually, is there a game past or present that you really, that's it? That's the game that I gravitate to.
I really like Savage Worlds, especially the newest edition, but it'd be something like 60% Savage Worlds, about 30% Fate, and maybe 10% Blades in the Dark.
What is it about Fate that you like that you would want to incorporate?
Well, two things. One, the Fate Fractal, so the Fate Fractal is anything to be designed as a character, like a building. And the building might not have the same stats or skills, but it's still going to be built like a character. I just love that. Everything is built on the same chassis. Aspects, I really, really like aspects.
I think aspects would be a good way to get bennies, right? Which I understand, like your edge hindrance thing and that whole system. But I think the aspect is a little bit more, I don't know, it's vague, but also more defined.
Yeah. Well, in 5e, you can see they've done something like aspects with the traits, bonds, flaws. Aspects are good. And they codified its attack, defend, overcome, create advantage. That's the four actions you can do with every skill. Mm-hmm. And breaking everything into those one of four categories is a really nice design space kind of thing.
I know you're a Dresden fan. Have you played the Dresden Fate game?
Yep, all of them. I actually did. I did one of the maps for one of the supplements for one of the Dresden games.
So you did one of the maps for one of the supplements. How do you get just I did the one map?
Oh, it was a favor for Fred Hicks.
Oh well, I guess that makes sense. He just rings you up. Hey, Ruben, I need this one. Yeah. I'm Fred Hicks. I need this one map done.
Yeah, well, I started doing all the work for Hero because Fred was one that did all their layout beforehand. But when he started doing a lot more stuff with Evil Hat, he's the one who put my name in for Hero. So, I mean, the industry's pretty small. You start learning a lot of people, and
well, sure, but then you developed a good reputation for yourself, and somebody else is willing to give your name in lieu of their own, or if they're leaving. That's pretty nice, man.
Yeah, I mean, these days, almost everything I get is just word of mouth.
So what is so you've done Dresden gaming. It's a system that you like. It's an IP that you like. Did you ever feel awkward gaming in that IP from something that you like and you know well? Like, to me, there's something, I don't know, it's almost taboo to game in a world that I've consumed other entertainment in. Like, I don't want to play in Lord of the Rings.
Right. I've never been interested in playing Lord of the Rings either. No, I found it kind of actually oddly comforting because I knew it well, and I knew, like, okay, I'm going to change this. This is different in my game. You know, even the setting is just a suggestion.
It seems like that it's a thing where people don't have such a fanatic, you know, I don't know, just this fanaticism for the dogma of the thing, right? Like, you know, I never want to game Star Wars because people are afraid you're going to ruin Star Wars.
Oh, and I've run Star Wars and I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds right. Let's just go with that.
I don't know why I have such a hard time. I have such a hang up with stuff. I have a hard time with wrong fun. And people not playing right. And I know that's my own damage, but so Ruben, something else that we were discussing off of the recording is the impact that COVID has had on your workload. I must assume that it has reduced said workload, and you were seeing something as a result of no conventions? Well,
yeah, so every time of year, there are a few times a year, usually 5 to 6 months before, like, Gen Con season, basically, you get a big spike in work because people want to have the new hotness out for the conventions. And without that push of conventions, there's been less of that. There's less pressure now to get books done in a certain amount of time.
Can I ask, Ruben, when people start in, let's say, October, so in April, May, when companies start knocking on your door, or, you know, sending you emails, I assume is the way they really do it. If you start seeing a big influx of work, For example, several months before Gen Con, you would see work for companies X, Y, and Z. Do you think that you're going to see an influx of work soon? And if you do, is that a good indication, or?
I'm hopeful I will. And yeah, if I start seeing an uptick, I might start making firmer convention plans.
Understood. Yeah, because for the rest of the world, man, I don't know how hard it has been, but I do know that there are professional retailers who convention circuit is 80% of their income. I know small game companies where 30+% of their income their sales are coming from conventions, and a second year without a con season, man, it just terrifies me for the industry that I love.
Yeah, I know. On the flip side, though, I've been doing a lot more small press stuff, as so many of us were kind of forced to take long vacations. I'm starting to see more people finishing up the little games. They're like, oh, I should finish that sometime. And now that people finally have time, I'm doing a lot of more small stuff.
That's the other thing that I wonder, too, is that how much is the industry going to be impacted by this? Because my concern is that we're going to develop a habit of we don't go to conventions and we don't go to the game store, and I just go directly to the person via Kickstarter and my social medias, and we just become further isolated, right? I mean, the thing about cons is we got to be together.
Yeah, well, and a lot of it, too, is like a lot of gaming these days has become performative. I mean, actual plays are super popular right now. And it's bringing in a ton of new gamers, and that performative aspect, I think a lot of people are now kind of getting virtual socialization, and like they're getting their itch through watching other people play.
I don't think that's going to change, right? Because I think that technology is going to continue to further isolate us and to cater our individual realities. But I also think that part of the problem with gaming is in being in person is confrontation, and people are just going to be conditioned to be in their homes and, I don't know, consume entertainment. I mean, the idea that I'm going to spend time as entertainment watching another person play video games and commenting, or watching another group of people play a role-playing game, that is very, very different to my way of thinking and how I was brought up. But I wasn't raised with this technology.
Yeah, I mean, neither was I. I think it's also notable that, certainly now my very favorite local game shop, Mox Boarding House, actually owned by Card Kingdom. There's a few up in Seattle too, but all the newer game places I've seen are starting to serve a lot of food, drinks, and they're providing big, nice play spaces. And I think some gaming is going to shift to be more of a, not quite a date night, but a fun night out activity. And at the same time, board games are still huge.
Do you do any print design for board game stuff? I know you were saying you do some card games and...
I've done a few board game things too, yeah.
Really? What have you worked on?
Oh, just a couple of small things. I did a bunch of work for an educational game. Yeah, a friend of mine is a Montessori teacher, so I did some stuff. Because I was gonna do. I mean, you can see over my shoulder my part of my board game collection. I was gonna geek out because despite the fact that role playing games are my primary love, I do adore board games. Well, Ruben, yeah, the black shelf behind me is all board games.
Oh, is it really? Is it one of those IKEA? Yeah. Yep. It's a staple among our people. The IKEA shelf is like the modern day version of the Crown Royal bag, right?
Oh, I have never thought about it like that, but you're absolutely right.
I did not think about that until this very moment. And with that stroke of genius out of my mouth, Ruben, thank you so much for your time. If somebody wants to connect with you professionally, right? If somebody has some print design work that they want to do, I'm assuming that you're a 1099 and you do freelance stuff and you're not under anybody's thumb.
So many 1099s.
So if somebody wants to contact you to have some graphic design work done, where would they do that?
3d6design.com.
How the hell did you get that?
I've owned the URL for years. I also have saveversusdm.com.
Yeah, well, that one I saw because I actually, when I was cyber stalking you, I did a bunch of research on Save versus DM and was reading RPGNet posts from the early 2000s. And
oh, God.
It was fun.
Reasonable rates. I give new customers a discount, too.
Brilliant. Well, Ruben, thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Why We Game is a production of the Influence Foundation. All rights reserved. Audio editing by Brodor. Music by Owen Godwin.